The Saviours of Cinderfall have landed, and boy howdy, they are looking mighty fine. Welcome to War Games on Toast, all of you lovely people. It's me, it's Toast. How are you this wonderful Wednesday? Like a mighty twin-tailed comet, Games Workshop have stealth dropped some new rules for a whole new warband for Warcry. Groovy. Where once there stood a mere Bladeborn faction, the Order of Azyr are now a fully fledged faction in the vein of the Black Talons. This is an exciting time and I am itching to dive right in. Rest assured, I have been poring over the ancient tomes, the dusty scrolls of the Saviours of Cinderfall, and everything I say here will be timeless, it will be correct, and in no way will this be balked at all. Probably. But before we dive into all of that, please consider hitting a like, a comment and subscribing to the channel, as your support helps me fight against that dastardly YouTube algorithmic demon. And if you want to help in a more tangible way, then please consider joining my Patreon or my YouTube members, like all of these wonderful people on screen now. You get access to some extra content, giveaways and more. But without further ado, let's get on with the show.
And now for something completely different.
Right off the bat, we gotta tackle the elephant in the room. The Saviours of Cinderfall are part of the Order of Azyr. You may have spotted that rune mark from the recently released Hexbane's Hunter set. What's very important to note here is that the Saviours of Cinderfall are not Bladeborn at all. This is a fully fledged warband. That being said, Hexbane's Hunters are still Bladeborn, but that entire Bladeborn warband can be hired without Haskell into the Saviours of Cinderfall. Heck, if you wanted to bring Haskell as well, you are free to do so. If you want more information on Hexbane's Hunters and Bladeborn in general, I have you covered. Just watch this video here. Links are in the description or in the top right or wherever I decide to put it. Oh, and every model here is unique. You cannot take more than one of each. Think the Black Talons and you are on the right track. And finally, because they have the Order of Azyr rune mark, they gain access to more abilities than Games Workshop put in the PDF. With all of that cleared up, let's look at some of these guys' rules. Starting with their reaction, we have Grim Resolve. This is a direct carryover from Hexbane and Co, and it's just as solid here. Basically, you get to heal D3 damage before any attack lands, even ranged attacks. A key thing to note, the heal happens before the damage. So if you're at full health, the heal will do nothing. And in addition, only models with the Warrior rune mark can use it, which is a little bit limiting. Only 3 out of the 6 models in the Saviours of Cinderfall can actually use Grim Resolve, so bear that in mind and don't go too gung-ho with using this heal. On to the lads, the ladies, and of course the doggos. We start with Hanavatol. Hanavatol is the chap you need to take if you want to play Saviours of Cinderfall. Besides Haskell, they are the only model capable of leading the warband, and thankfully Hanavar's pretty damn okay. In terms of defensive stats, Hanavar is movement 4, toughness 3, and has 20 wounds. This is a noticeable downgrade from Haskell's toughness 4, but he still retains 125 points and he's not terrible. 20 wounds will go a long way here, and offensively, Hanavar is a little bit better than Haskell with a mighty melee profile of 4.325 and a pistol that fires at 3.413 at 8 inches with no minimum range. As a pure stats package, these are really solid. There are a few small alterations here if you're used to playing Haskell, but frankly, bringing both into a list gives you a pair of super useful stat blocks. Hanavar also gains access to the triple right tools for the job. This rather slapping ability allows Hanavar to crit on a 5+. Considering Hanavar's low strength, they will likely be hitting things on a 5+ anyway, so all those hits now turn into meaty crit 5s and will chunk a lot of things. I am a huge fan of this. in theory, because there is another ability that I like a little bit more. And that's because Hannibal also has access to the brand of righteousness found in Hexbane's Hunters that boosts his crit value based on the ability dice value. We are talking about a potential to skyrocket to crit 11 on both attack actions if you're swinging in melee twice. This is an outstanding ability, but you really need to have a high triple to pull it off, and of course it does directly clash with right tools for the job. I would use right tools if you have a low triple, and brand if you have a high triple. It is just that simple. Because Hannibal is so focused on his crit damage, I would be very tempted to spend the 10 points to increase his crit to critical damage 6, just to elevate his ludicrous damage even further. Moving on to Armand Callus, and I love. Not only is the model awesome, but this lass has outstanding stats for her cost. For 130 points, she struts up with movement 4, toughness 4 and 18 wounds. She is kinda pants in melee, but you will never use her in melee because she has a ranged 8 dual pistol setup with no minimum range, and they are 3, 4, 2, 3, which absolutely destroy chaff. Give this lass +1 strength on her pistols and she's going to shred everything. She is a menace and I love her to bits. She's also much harder to kill than you would expect thanks to that killer defensive line. Her unique triple is give them both barrels. The range of this ability does depend on the value of the dice, which is then doubled, but basically it allows Armand to fire off bonus range attack actions. This also works in melee if you're firing your pistols. Get her in position, then fire away with a devastating volley of 2-3 damage shots. I would never leave home without Armand, and if I could take more of her, I would. They are fantastic. But now we get to the bulk, the meat, the big chunky man himself. We have Balthus, the keeper of whatever that says. Balthus, man, we just keep on getting dubs here. Balthus is one of the most interesting tank characters in the entire game. This lad is basically a souped up Annihilator Prime, but has more movement and more wounds. He takes a little hit in offense, but that's okay, because this guy is pretty good value just for his stats. He becomes a total beast though once you factor in his impressive ability. They will break upon my shield is not only an amazing sounding ability, it is quite the spicy sauce. This thing reduces the damage Balthus will take from all attack actions for the rest of the battle round by the value of the ability dice to a minimum of 1. And this means he could reduce the value of all damage by 6. You know those horrifying 4-8 profiles? Yeah, they just got docked to 1-2. Even a low triple goes to the moon with this ability. You basically force Balthus down your opponent's throat, engage them and then punch them a few times. Then you armor up and become quite literally immortal. Your opponents then have very, very few options. I mean, even a 5-10 Chimera or Gutload, those guys can be dropped all the way to 1-4. And those models are damn expensive. If you're taking those guys to a 1-4 profile, they are not going to be happy. And sure, they can just disengage, but then most things can't then go on to attack on that same turn. Or alternatively, they could just hit you, in which case you've reduced their damage to irrelevancy. Or you just tank it on your ludicrous toughness. Remember, this guy is toughness 6 with 30 wounds, and with this ability, he just doesn't die. It's crazy good. Think of Balthus as a roadblock. Just send him in against anything and just get to tanking and spanking. Just whash, smack them in the arse, and then just take it on your iron abs, right? I just love this guy, beyond unique in his role. Even against chaff, throw him into a giant horde of chaff and lower all that 1-4 damage or whatever to just nothing. You don't care. They are now just doing 1-1 damage. You will survive a bajillion hits and never die. It's crazy good. And of course, he can still just heal. He has access to Grim Resolve. You could theoretically game the system a little bit to get some heals off. Wild stuff, wild stuff. Love this guy. Calming down a little bit, okay, we got a little bit excited. We saw a big burly man, okay, wife be damned, children be damned, okay, got a little too excited. But now we're going to go on to Mistress Varentia, and she is also very good, very interesting, okay. At 100 points, she's fairly expensive for what she brings in terms of stats. But she is an old woman, okay? You can't expect her to do much. She's a bit frail. This lass ain't going to do much in a scrap. Come on now, right? But even then, though, for 100 points, she's almost as good as a best to go in combat. Almost. 3424 is kind of fine, and 1436 at a range is also kind of fine for some like shock burst damage potential. Throw in movement 4, toughness 3, and a fairly impressive 15 wounds. And she just about justifies her cost in just raw stats. But then, forget the good stuff. Then we have her ability. Boy howdy, we're getting there. Secrets from the Shadows is possibly one of the most impactful triples in the entire game in terms of its potential to mess with your opponent in a completely unique way. Roll a dice, add your ability dice value to that number, and if it totals 7+, you get to delete one of your opponent's doubles, triples, or quads. That's it. That's all it does. I don't even have to go into why that's amazing if used at the right time, but I will. Did your opponent just pump a triple to fuel healthier? Not anymore. That rampage about to get you down? Nah man. Get wrecked. If your triple is high enough, you just can't fail. You will pass on average with a mid triple, like a 3, okay? It can be risky at a 3, but the risk directly messes with your opponent's resources in a way that very few models can. And if you have a 4 or a 5, you are very likely to pass, and a 6, you guarantee the pass. This is an incredible ability that I suspect would be a prime ally bait had she been a hero. As she's not, you cannot ally her. So if you want to experience the wonders of Mistress Varentia, you will have to play the Saviors of Cinderfall and watch this darn space. Varentia will be a mainstay in Saviors. I am calling it here first, and I will duel any other content creator who dares challenge that assertion. I know I've been a little bit positive on all the models so far. Okay, I can't help it though. These guys are all good so far. They're all really interesting. A toolbox of wonders. And Lysa continues that trend in a way. This lass is moving for toughness 3 and 15 wounds, but it's only 75 points. And for that defensive line, that's quite the steal. It's quite good. Throw in a 3-inch melee profile, packing 2-3-1-3, and you kind of see where she falls apart. She ain't killing much. That's a pretty bad damage profile. But that's fine, she is cheap as chips. Where she comes in is with her rather wonderful triple, Tangle Them Up. This is another way to debilitate your opponent. Pick a laddie within 3 inches and now their attack characteristic is reduced by 2. Those attack 3 Fomoroids, damn, sucks to be them right now. This is especially good in formats that do not allow blessings, because all kinds of things get completely boned by this ability, and unlike every other ability on this list, her ability isn't dice dependent, meaning she can throw out a 111 when you get one, and boom, you get an immediate and powerful effect. Lysa is very much a chaff piece though, with support, as opposed to pure support. So get her on objectives, poke with her melee range, and then throw this out when needed, okay? She's the cheapest thing in the warband, and her impact is similarly the lowest in the grand scheme, but that doesn't make her bad. It just makes her an early cut sometimes. Now, an almost certain cut is sadly the doggo of this band called Balthus. Balthus is probably the worst unit in the warband. For 95 points, you get a movement 6, toughness 4, wound 8 piece with a 4-4-1-4 profile and no abilities. This laddie ain't surviving much, he ain't killing much, although he can crit fish, but he is fast. He can get on points and he can just mess around. My main issue though is that the Order of Azyr already have access to Pock's 2 dogs and Lysa for cheaper. You can even just take a Bridget Axwald, who is better. Balthus will likely be an early cut. There had to be one loser in the warband and the doggo just so happened to be at this time, which is a shame. But let's talk about Hallowed Vengeance for a second. Hallowed Vengeance is another ability that doesn't exist in the PDF that Games Workshop provided. This is one of the Order of Azyr abilities that came with Hexbane's Hunters, but can still be used by the heroes of Cinderfall. This quad didn't do too much before, but with 3 more warriors now available to the Order of Azyr, you can get a lot of work out of this with enough setup. Basically, if any friendly lad dies, you get to unload a shed load of attacks into that laddie. It's clunky, it's silly, but if you can land it, whoo boy, you can get a lot of stuff done. A thing to remember though, only warriors can take advantage of the quad, but any friendly thing dying will trigger it. This includes allies and Bladeborn. Don't forget about that because that makes this ability really spicy. So my overall thoughts before we get onto lists. The Saviours of Cinderfall are awesome. You have 6 amazing laddies here apart from Balthus, all unique, all packing fantastic triples apart from Balthus, all bringing something funky to the table apart from Balthus. These guys are a toolbox apart from Balthus, and the nuance to their play is going to depend on if you can use the right tool at the right time. Remember, these guys are all about triples. You will maybe get one cool thing off a turn. Maybe. You have to pick the right one. Then you throw in Hexbane's Hunters for even more Witch Hunter goodness, and my god, you have a lot of really cool things going on. But will they be competitive? I have no idea. They are packing a lot of wounds, a lot of damage, a decent amount of ranged, and a fair amount of chaff. They feel really efficient to me, although I don't really care for the maths. It's just my gut telling me they are pretty darn solid, and I expect great things from that. What's more, there are more models that could be added to the range. Cursed City has a couple of witch hunters that could bolster the order even further. And frankly, I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do with this whole Bladeborn transforming into a larger faction shtick in the future, because it's really cool. We haven't seen this before. This is completely new ground. So it's just cool stuff. But it's time for a list. I've only made one, okay? I'm sorry, I've only made one. They've been out for literally a day. Okay, I've made one. It's fine. But I will give you a cool list to try, which is what I was drawn to immediately, and I think on paper it looks pretty damn cool. So we'll have a look. I call this list the Burn the Witch list purely because you have to give every list a cool name, even if it doesn't really fit. So, if you want to go all Order of Azyr, then this is the source for you. You take a Hannava Toll, you take a Haskell Hexbane, you take an Armand Callus, a Quiet Pock, Valius the Keeper of Over There, Mistress Varentia, Rat Spike, and Grotbiter. You have 8 laddies here, which is a solid size. You have a decent ranged component with Pock, Armand, Haskell, and Hannava, and even Varentia. Throw in the natural bulk of Valius, Haskell, and Hannava, and Armand, in addition to the speed of Rat Spike and Grotbiter, and you have a lot of ways to deal with a lot of things. Chaff-heavy warbands will fear Pock's exploding bolts and Armand's pistols. Titans will dread Valius. Ability-centric warbands will crumble to the calculated risks of Varentia. And did we mention we have enough points left over to give Armand and Pock +1 strength on their ranged weapons and Hannava or Valius +1 crit? Because we do, and it rocks. I genuinely love this list, and when I played it, I had a blast. The only alteration to this list I would maybe consider would be a drop Haskell for a dispossessed hero. This gives you access to Over My Dead Body, which really helps you in objective games, and you have fair scope to pick from at 125 to 165 points, which is the amount you can play with here. If you are looking for other powerful allies, maybe squeezing in the Calthea Xander could do work here. Calthea Xander would get Armand into range, Pock into range, both of them firing again, Valius into range, Valius attacking again. there's a lot of things that work well with more actions, right? This warband has very few ways to gain that naturally, and Calthea will fix that. The issue is she's 210 points. So fitting her in, you might have to cut like a few things, and we're talking like 2 or 3 things, or drop Valius. And if you drop Valius, oh man, I like Valius. I like him too much to even consider right now, but he could be the cut. He could be the cut to take a Calthea, and I would understand if you did. I would just be a little bit disappointed in you, but we'll cover that maybe in a different video. Speaking of which, that's the end of this video. If you made it this far, you are an absolute legend. Be sure to leave a like, a comment, and subscribe to help the channel out, and let me know down below what you think of the Saviours of Cinderfall. I am a huge fan of the aesthetic, and as someone who has been running Hexbane's Hunters for months now, I am really excited to run a whole warband dedicated to this theme, and from what I've seen and what I've played, they don't just look cool, they're really cool on the battlefield too. A huge thank you to my patrons and my members who help support the channel, and a massive shout out to my algorithmic demon slayers: Armor Enthusiast 7, Brioche, CT6497, Girth Demon, Head Native Paint, Heinz D, Key Plang, Long Run Hobbies, Lord Firelax, Tough, Tootin' Baby, and Velas. Until next time, lads, ladies, and everybody in between and beyond, ta-ra.